Coaching in Session,
your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Hey, Jason, how are we doing?
Doing good. How are you, Michael?
Doing well. Thanks so much for coming on. So easy day. Today, we're going to be talking about your work, Men's Guide, Men's Coach, how you help men with mental health and emotional health, right?
That's right.
Perfect. So we're just going to dive right in. Can you tell us how you got into this work? And of course, give us some backstory on who you are too.
Sure. Yeah. My journey into becoming a men's guide and a men's group facilitator really started with my own personal journey, right? In that it was in my mid-20s, I got lucky and just happened to be in an area where I got exposed to my first men's group. And it was ultimately the catalyst for my greatest transformation in terms of many changes, both in my inner world and outer world, that have helped me really get to where I am today. And I became so passionate about being in a group, I just started talking about it all the time to people that were around me because I was like, hey, I have this group. It's really supportive. It's really helped me grow and change and take some bold action in my life, that it ultimately, people started asking me, hey, can I come to your group? Can I join? And I was like, no, actually, we meet in a little office. Literally, there's not enough room for any more men. So that had me pivot to start to offer groups so other men could start to experience what I was offering. And it's really only grown since then. And the intensity that a lot of men are experiencing in the world in terms of social isolation and uncertainty and just a decline in mental and physical health for a lot of men has only gotten stronger. And so the need for, the thing I love has only grown. And so, yeah, long and short, it's what changed my life. And so now it's what I'm inspired to help other men use to change theirs.
Powerful. We have to look back at when did the problem start to happen, right? Was it in the 20s? Was it in the 30s where men just basically said, I'm not going to support one another in a sense, right? Like the groups are about support, being open, being able to heal. Because when you're maybe in your household with your wife and your kids, you have to be maybe this figure of a tough guy, right? You have to protect and provide, and it could be debilitating for some people, especially if they're just scraping by. So there's a lot of insecurity that they might be dealing with. And it's helpful to be around other men, especially to say, you know what, I'm not the only one. Because when it seems like you're fighting this fight by yourself and you're literally going against the world, it is extremely exhausting. It's tiring, and it has such a huge impact on your mental. And the mental is not so much only about like, are you thinking positive? Are you more negative, right? Like literally, are you showing up in your day? Are you doing the things that you're supposed to be doing? Are you drinking alcohol? Are you going out gambling, right? These little negative things that you might be doing, you do it almost subconsciously because maybe they make you feel good. And so we're looking for that bit of peace. And I have found men's groups are so powerful in creating that peace. But I do want to get to maybe the root of, or how did this mental illness or the mental mayhem in men's minds started to happen and began?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any specific moment in time. I would say a lot started to shift probably around the Industrial Revolution, where, it used to be men were part of small communities and tribes and trades where they were integrated with their families and the people they were helping. And then as, kind of factory work really got born, suddenly we'd go off and we'd be separate, kind of doing these things. And then, at some point, I'm here in the States, and it's part of our kind of founding myth of the rugged individual, right? That rogue cowboy who doesn't need anybody and is tough as nails and just survives and pushes harder all the way to success. And that has emerged as a type of myth. I call it the myth of the lone wolf, right? That you're a tough man as long as you don't need help from anybody and never show any weakness. We also kind of frame that as the man box, this thing that's emerged over the years that for a man to be considered a man, hey, you got to check these boxes, such as don't ever show any vulnerability, never ask for help, always work harder, etc. That all, I would say started to constellate in the last 100 years or so. And then culture shifted, right? The way people relate has increasingly shifted over the last years, where a lot of the places men would get at least some community and connection have dissolved and fallen apart. So social groups, local community organizations, church going is way down, and there's been a shift to more and more mediated relationships through technology and social media and work from home. And so a lot of men are extremely isolated and have been more vulnerable to the impact of that as we've gone through these cultural shifts that, again, here in the States too, the dream is basically to live alone in private in a lot of ways, right? I want to have my own car in my own house with a giant yard away from everybody so I don't have to interact. Like, that's kind of what we're fed success is. And it turns out that has a huge impact on our nervous systems, particularly as men. I mean, the health impact is astronomical on guys. Men with strong social connections have a 50% increased likelihood of survival. Like, they live longer. Men who are considered isolated and alone, it's the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, like a pack of cigarettes a day, basically. It's that bad for your health. In general, men who are socially isolated will die about 30% sooner. Like, it just goes through the roof. This stuff isn't woo-woo. It turns out when you're feeling connected, depression goes down like 25%, your immune system gets stronger, and it gives men purpose and belonging. And that was all kind of taken away from us because for so many of us men from a young age, we're taught that other men aren't safe. They're our competition, right? And that we have to compete against them. And if we share any vulnerability or weakness, we're going to be harmed for it. So men, just from a young age, from all kinds of reasons, are basically taught that to be a man is to be strong, and to be strong is to be invulnerable. And so we hold everything inside, and lo and behold, that has huge consequences for us on our health, our well-being, our relationships, that catches up to most men at some point.
You brought up so many good points there, and I encourage people just to rewind that a little bit and just to listen to it one more time, because when we're looking at the epidemic of how men are just operating, of course, we can look at society, we can look at how things are flowing, but there's almost a biological innate thing that happens in a male's brain, right? Protect, provide. You talked about competition with other men, and rightfully so, right? You want your woman, right? And it's very different for men in the world of marriage today, because if you think of like a biological male and what he's able to do, he can go have as many babies a year as he wants, right? And a woman, she's going to have one term pregnancy a year. Now, this is not to say, about balance or equality. This is just talking about the reality. Sometimes what men will do is they will say, you know what, I just want to find my wife. I just want to find someone to love. And maybe they find someone who's really good and they get their heart broken. And they say, well, like, I'm in a really tough spot now. Maybe they lose half of their stuff, their house, their kids, they lose everything and things are ripped away. So, I mean, on one side, I can feel for certain men who want to be isolated and alone and who don't care about the 30%, extra lifespan in life, because they're basically dealing with, all of this trouble maybe. But on the other side, like to dive into that maybe uncertainty, to dare to start a family, to have kids and to raise them, regardless of what is the outcome. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. But yet society is stigmatizing marriage today. So if we look at marriage statistics before, like marriage was growing at a steady rate, but now most men are saying, you know what, why even get married when I can go get sex with another woman, because they're passing it out like Halloween candy. So now now they're saying, well, why should I start a family? Why should I commit to one person when I have this ability to do all of these different things? And, togetherness, right? The idea of we can create something, as a community. I don't think it only ends at men's groups. It's the family aspect, the kids aspects, the legacy aspect. But we do need to get men in groups together to talk about these things, to talk about the hardships, to talk about the fears maybe of marriage or starting or beginning or just putting yourself out there for a business or, something in life, right? There's that innate fear of failure. And failure is basically where I would like to go, where many men fear failure to some degree. They fear going up to the girl and failing to get her number or to have her like him. The guy fails to maybe be prominent in his workplace, climbing the corporate ladder. So failure is going to be one of those things that almost are an anchor, not only within the body, but also in the mind. How do you help men overcome fear with your men's groups?
Yeah, so for a lot of guys, I actually tie it to safety. And what I mean by that is when we don't feel like we have anywhere to fall back into if something doesn't work out, we tighten up and get really worried about making the wrong choice, right? And a lot of men who are isolated, that's doing the kind of lone wolf thing. That's the reality. Like, if this doesn't work out, I have nothing to fall back on. Or for a lot of men, they also conflate what I do with my worth. So I'm only successful if I make a certain amount of money, have a woman of a certain amount of attractiveness, if my car looks like this, if my body looks like this. And the truth is, ultimately, those things never satisfy anyone when we're basing it on that exterior validation. But what I found in a good group is when a man feels supported, paradoxically, he's able to take more risks because he doesn't fear if it doesn't work out. He has somewhere to come back to regroup and ground and get supported. Ideally, this is one of the great gifts good parenting should give children, right? That, okay, you have a steady, calm, loving, supportive home, so you can go out and take risks. And, sometimes we see this play out in the data, even of children that come from homes of wealth tend to be more successful creating businesses and stuff. There's some connections and stuff to that, but there's also, they're willing to take more risks because, oh, hey, I tried that business. Usually by the time you see someone with a successful business, they've often had 2 or 3 that didn't work. Now, if you have nothing to fall back on, it's going to be a lot more stressful to take that risk. If you're like, okay, that one didn't work. My basic needs are met. I'm surviving. I learned from that. Now I'm going to try again. So men's community, what it does is it gives us a place to go back to when life doesn't work the way we intend. And in the groups I create, part of the culture we create is there is no failure. There's just feedback. We're just constantly getting feedback from the world about our presence, about our skills, about how we're showing up. And we want to take that feedback in and use that to grow. And when we have a place that can quite literally hold us when we've collapsed or fallen or uncertain what to do, or even if we are in fear, men come out of that with a lot more agency and willingness to take some risks, to take some tries, to take some shots. And it starts to redefine even what failure is. It's the I think the Wayne Gretzky quote, right? That you don't make any of the shots. You might be able to think of it. You miss every shot you don't take.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Which is the idea that, the culture we change is and I work with men around this all the time in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. The guys I know that have the biggest pain in their heart, it is not from, I approached the woman, I put myself out there, I took the business risk, and it didn't work out. It's the men who I never tried. I never even gave myself the chance to find out, and I will never know. I call that the arrows in the heart, that almost every man carries them. They can name a couple of moments where they just collapsed in fear, in a sense, because they didn't feel safe enough to take the risk. And we carry those deep inside. So a good group helps redefine failure even. I've been in some groups, man, where one of the most fun things we've done is we create our resume of failure. Right? So instead of all the things you've been successful at, it's where did you flame out? Where did you burn? Where did you crash? What did you try and just spectacularly didn't go how you wanted? And it releases a lot of energy for men to see that in a group and realize, oh, I'm not the only one. And hey, if I'm really honest, I did learn something about myself in that process, which has brought me closer to getting to where I want now.
This brings up the idea of confidence, when you're trying to do something, right? They say confidence or courage, it comes after the fact. So to do it afraid, they say or encourage you. If you're afraid to do something, you do it anyway. And then you build up the tolerance. If you're afraid of public speaking, guess what? How you fix it is you go on stage. And it might not feel comfortable in the beginning, but the more you do it, the more you acclimate to it. And this is for almost any aspect of your life. If you're afraid to talk to girls, talk to 100 girls. By the 101st girl, you're going to say, you know what, this is, a walk in the park. I already did it 100 times. So we do have to encourage ourselves to do the things that maybe give us some fear or some insecurity or some doubt. And then we dive into that. And you brought up a good point with finding a stable ground. For if you try something and you don't succeed, at least you have some place to go to talk about, like, hey, like, this is where I went wrong. And I always say people have blind spots, right? Just like in your cars and things like that. Yeah, you got your blind spot sensors and stuff like that. But even that is not really 100% foolproof, right? Because if you're changing lanes very quickly, it's only checking that one lane. And by the time you switch over to that other lane coming up, guess what? There's a car there. And it's going to be the last minute where either you're paying attention because the car can't keep up. So we think we might have everything covered, right? We have this system, we have that. And sure enough, we still have blind spots. But the best way to look at your blind spots is to say, you know what? Let me have someone look at where I'm going, right? Look at my life, a coach, a guide, a mentor, and just say, hey, like, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm struggling with or in, and they can give some insight. And the insight is not to say, hey, I'm better than you. Hey, like, you should know this. And I'm sure there's countless men who are going to be listening to this saying, you know what? Someone has told me that before. I should know this, right? I should be able to handle this, right? And it just goes into the idea of confidence and what is a man today? Because we look at a confident male maybe who is certain of his capabilities and he's certain of his emotions and certain of his actions. Those men today might be considered toxic. Those men might be considered a bad influence. And I'm not saying that every man that has these traits of confidence and courageous and is outgoing is a good role model. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is society is very quick to label men. They will say, this is not a real man. You're not a real man if you don't go out and pay for the first date. So there's this huge stigma on men. And if a man is maybe missing or lacking, or maybe he doesn't even want to dive into the realm of what society wants, his confidence is going to be lacking to some degree. How would a man understand truly what he should be living for in the world today when society is telling them what they should be doing and what they should be feeling?
Yeah, to me, this is the great purpose of men's work. So getting together with other men to go deeper than the surface. What am I really here for? What do I want? What are my values? What do I care about? And then as we get clear about that, to take a very sober assessment of, and what is the life I'm actually leading, pointing towards? Because oftentimes they're pretty divergent, right? We think we want to be one thing, and then we're doing something else on the daily basis. And that's where a good group can give us that feedback in a really important way. And the masculine, right, this part that anchors most men, but every human being has, the masculine grows through feedback and challenge. It's literally how we grow. And there's only so much we can see in ourselves, right? A lot of the work I do with men is what we call shadow work, right? It's becoming aware of our shadow. What shadow? What are you talking about? I don't see any shadow, right? It's always behind us. But it's often running us, running our behavior. It could be shadow from the culture, from our family, from our religion, from our own wounding. The thing is about other people is they can help us see that. Shadow is often very obvious in other people. It's like, hey, don't you see every time you talk about this thing, you're doing this thing? And they're like, what are you talking about? Once you see it, you have more agency and control over it. And what is challenging right now for a lot of men is we are being asked to be more. For a long time, it was enough if you provided, you were holding up your end of the equation, particularly in family and relationships. That is not the case anymore. It's not sufficient enough these days for most feminine partners. For most people, they want an available, present man who can provide and is connected and is involved with the family. What's hard for a lot of guys is we are not taught or given the training for how to do that from a very young age. Because we are taught, your feelings are weak. Get out of your body. Most men are rewarded for being disembodied, meaning, oh, I can just push through, I can just grind, right? For a long time, and for, like you said, for some very real biological reasons, male bodies have been considered disposable, right? One man can rebuild a village. Men have traditionally held the most dangerous, the most toxic jobs. For a long time, we predominantly made up the military. It was our bodies that were considered disposable. And that continues today in a lot of ways in terms of, work 80 hours a week and sleep under your desk. Guess what? That sounds awesome. Guess what it's doing? It's generally destroying somebody's body. That will catch up to them. And I work with many men who, were CEOs for decades. And sometimes they wake up one morning and they can't get out of bed. Their bodies are like, no. You've burned the midnight oil, you've charged too much to the credit card, and we're done. I can't do this anymore. And they will crash down hard because they've been neglecting themselves. So we're being asked to be so much more in life, and a lot of men don't have a direction of what does that mean? How do I be useful in the world these days if the woman I'm dating or I want to marry, if she makes more money than me? What do I bring to the family? That's a real thing a lot of guys I know deal with. And turns out there's plenty of answers there, but they're deeper than just providing on a financial level. They're about bringing real presence and stillness and a regulated nervous system and an ability to take in a lot of perspectives and make choices that benefit the most people. Turns out to do all that really helps if we're in our bodies and connected to ourselves with men and connected to other people. The last thing I'll share is that, those really confident men that are often judged in society, not all of them, but many of them, the challenge is they're disconnected from their hearts and their impact. Meaning, yeah, I'll go for what I want, I'll take what I want, but I'm not registering the impact on the people and the environment around me. So I'm prioritizing myself at the expense of else. This new way that's forming is, actually, we need men who are decisive, who know what they want, who will go for it. But we also need them to be attuned to, if I'm causing you harm in getting what I want, that's not helping anybody. So what does it look like for me to get what I want without causing you harm? And for me to notice what the impact is. And the truth is, a lot of guys don't want to take that level of responsibility. It's a big level up to say, hey, I gotta really be clear about what I want and then go for it in a way that isn't totally selfish. Oftentimes it means we have to really look inside and get clear about our motivations. And lo and behold, to tie it back together, it's when it's really great to have a group of men around you who know you, know your background, know your behavior, know what you want in the world. And as I will say, will give you that spinach in the teeth moment of pointing out something that you really might need to see that you're not aware of on your own. Like, hey, the way you're showing up here in this relationship, man, that's causing harm. Are you aware of what's happening? Because you're coming in every week and you're checking in about this, and nothing's changing. And most men I know actually long for that. We long for that level of men who are tracking us and love us enough to tell us when they see us off course. And it's not about calling out and, ostracizing someone, as we often say in men's work. It's about calling forward. I know that highest self that you're aiming for. I've felt that man inside you. And right now he's not here. So let's call him forward and bring this moment back into integrity.
Yeah, no, it's great, speaking to someone who's so passionate about their work. And I talk about this quite a bit, is like a man is always going to seek another man for some type of, I guess you could say, advancement. And not so much of giving, right? It's about understanding what is a man, because there's no guidebook saying, okay, read this and you're going to know how to be a man. right? Go to church and you're going to learn how to be a man, right? Go to work and you're going to learn how to be a man. There's no really formula for teaching a boy saying, okay, if you do this, you're going to be a man by the end of it, right? There's going to be so many paths and so many different journeys that young man has to go on to say, okay, this is who I want to become. And I think of, just inner city stuff, right? Boys who grew up with no fathers, and maybe they, find, solace in their friends, in the gangbangers, and they say, this is what I am going to be, my circumstance, maybe. Or maybe they say they have some money. I need some money to take care of my family or my mom or whatever. So some men come from naught. They come from hardship. And maybe they had a father who was abusive or a father who was out of the picture. And they say, I want to be different. I want to change. And sometimes they just kind of do things haphazardly and they don't look at the cause and the effect. They might say, you know what, this feels right to me. I'm going to work all these hours and, I'm going to be there for my kids and I'm going to take them to Disney World. And you do all of these things thinking like, this is what, I was missing or doing what was missing in your kid's life. So you're that person or that father figure that was never there. But maybe those kids don't need that father, right? They need something else. And you brought up a great point when like calling forward, right? I love when people call me out. They say, hey, Mike, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. I'm like, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for telling me, because it's difficult for me to kind of, I'm so busy to slow down and say, okay, where am I going wrong? What am I doing? What is not right? And for someone to say, hey, Mike, like I see this area right now. It's like you're starting to slack in this area, and it's not like a bad thing or anything, but it's a great awareness, right? Maybe I'm not communicating with my wife, or maybe I'm not spending enough time with my kids, or maybe I'm not being dutiful in my business. And I mean, it could be any little thing, and any little problem typically stems from a bigger root cause. So there's something that you have to uncover, and it could be scary to acknowledge it, saying, you know what, I'm the person who's the obstacle. I'm the person who is not mentally, giving myself the nourishment I need in order to move forward. Because a mental roadblock is not only, you saying you can't do it, it's you believing you can't do it. And so where did that belief come from? Right? Because we can see people who have done great things in life. We can look at people who have achieved wonderful things. We could look at the top percent of one, like the top 1% of men, right? We say, whoa, like they have all of these things. They have the big house, the fast cars. And yeah, sure, it's nice to dream about those things. But, people who have it, who are extremely aware of what they're feeling, they will say, it was better being broke, but not in the sense of being dirt broke, eating out of the garbage. It's like the money can sometimes cause problems, right? Because there'll always be a bigger house. There'll always be a faster car, a newer car. There'll always be a more beautiful girl for you to say, you know what? This is what I desire. This is what I want. And so I want to get into the conversation of the wanting I. We can call it it's what's the word I want to say? It's like something gold. It's like you're seeking gold constantly. You're looking for diamonds. Mm-hmm. You're always looking for the next thing. When in reality, we can look at what we have and we can say, you know what, this is good. Or we can say, you know what, this can be better, right? So depending on which avenue you want to go, how would men navigate that wanting and that desire, that maybe materialism in a sense a little bit, but the true meaning of life?
Yeah, I mean, this is harder and harder these days as consumerism and social media are constantly selling us this, if you just hit this next thing, then you'll be happy, right? The great pitfall many men make is that once I X, then I will feel free. Once I get the raise, once I get married, once I get the six-pack abs, once I get that house, you name it. There's this belief that once I get to that thing, once my bank account hits that number, then I'll feel free. And the truth is, it doesn't work that way. You can talk to anyone who had the big goal and they hit it, and then they wake up the next day and suddenly, now I need $3 million, right? And until you see through that, men will continue chasing that often for their whole lives. And the trouble with that is they will then miss their lives. Right? This is a real problem for a lot of guys who do get on that kind of escalator early on. Okay, I got to work hard, provide for my family, hit this amount of money, and they bust themselves for 20, 30 years, working many hours a week. Their kids hit 18, 19. Wife comes to him and says, I'm not in love with you anymore. We haven't had a relationship in 20 years. I don't even know who you are. You haven't been present in your kids' lives. They don't even know you. We're out of here, right? This is a very common story. And it's really painful because a lot of guys think, oh, I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to just do these things so that once that was all done, I could enjoy my life. Turns out you just lost 20 or 30 years of the best of your life that you won't get back. So it's this shift to realizing, there are statistics that above a certain amount of money, you don't really get that much happier. Like your set point just kind of stays. Now, this is enough to not be in poverty, to not be in constant stress. But beyond that, they find that, actually, more money sometimes creates more stress because then it's like, what do I do with it? Am I using it responsibly? Should I be getting more? My neighbor got more. I need to get more. And so waking up to this myth is the big thing for a lot of men, that this is it. The moment I'm in is only ever what matters. And I can have goals and I want to move towards them, but I want to be present here. And the big shift I tend to work with men around is the only real freedom, the only real, genuine freedom we can get as men is when we realize freedom is actually, in any given moment, I can choose where I want to put my attention. That's it. If we are gripped by, I got to do this thing, otherwise I'm not okay, or this, or this, or this, we're not actually free, right? We're stuck on a hamster wheel. That kind of freedom, it's a little bit more of the deep kind of spiritual kind. But when you realize that, it's like, wow, am I actually free right now? No. Am I free from my emotional self? Am I free from the shadow of what I think a man should be and what I'm supposed to do and what I feel like I'm going to be judged for? A lot of times we have very little freedom in our lives, and rewriting that narrative is extremely liberating for men, because then we do get to start to really tune in to ourselves. Okay, what's going to make me the most nourished, satisfied, healthy, and present right now? Where do I want my attention to be? Right here and now. And many of us men are constantly dissatisfied with the moment, right? Oh, it'll be better in the future once I X, Y, and Z. And again, the shift is, nope, you can only ever be free in the moment. What would it mean to be fully in this moment right now? Doesn't mean I don't have a preference for it to change, but I'm not going to be resisting it. I do this all the time, Matt, so I'm not here to judge other men. So many of us men walk through the world resisting the moment as it is because we think it should be different. And that ends up causing a lot of tension and a lot of stress. And oftentimes we miss out on some of the most important things in our lives.
And rewind that last part too, everyone, because that was powerful. When we look at just the idea of what freedom is, I think people, they think of just the ability of, to be able to do whatever they would like to do, financial freedom, right? People say, oh, I'd like to go on all these vacations or do all of these different things. But oftentimes we are shackled to, our mind, or we're shackled to our circumstances. As much as I would like to say, people should, not allow themselves to fall into that mindset, it's going to be a common occurrence. It's almost like you go to the gym and maybe you're feeling really good, but you're lifting, like maybe a very heavy weight, and something happens and you like tweak your shoulder or something, right? Now you're out of commission for weeks, if not months, right? Like you have to go light, you have to heal. And, just because you maybe done it once, or maybe you saw someone do it, it's, we have to look at, where we are today in a sense, right? Maybe you feel really good, you can lift heavy today. Maybe you feel really good, you can go an extra mile, whether it be with your family, your workplace, your friends, whoever, right? But you do have to give yourself a mind or a mindset that, what, this moment right here, like I make it for whatever it can be. Of course, it's always nice to daydream. It's nice to think of all the things and accolades you would like to accomplish in your life. And sure, right, put it in a journal, put it on a vision board or something, right? But then get to work. And I think it's so important that we understand the future, but we remain in the present. Because as long as we are moving in this life, we have life, right? Because the moment you're not living is the moment you stop worrying about everything. But at the same time, what would you like to be remembered for? Would you like to be remembered to be the man, the husband, the dad who was absent, who wasn't present, who wasn't confident in who he was, who wasn't truly free? He was shackled to the bounds of what society and the world envisioned for him. And I know 100% that men's groups and coaches and guides are there to help elevate you, get you to the next level, to help you break through the plateau and all the obstacles that might be weighing you down right now. It's important that you find someone. And I encourage people to, look at what Jason is doing with his men's groups and just how he helps other men, understand, and creating a space saying, it's okay to be, who you are, right? Because society might say you can't be this or you have to be that, but who do you want to be at the end of the day? So as we begin to wrap up, Jason, I would love to get some final words from you. And then also, if you could, please tell the audience where they can find you.
Yeah, I would just say to any men out there listening, the other thing to realize is getting connected. So making this shift to, I don't have to do it all alone. It's okay to get support, to ask for help from a coach, from a therapist, from a men's group. Here's the thing. The men I know in my life doing that, and I consider myself one of these, we end up getting more of what we want. It's actually not just a, well-being thing. There's a huge amount of productivity in it. You will achieve more and be able to go farther the more supported you are, right? There's great examples, and this is something most men are terrible at, is taking in support, asking for it and receiving it. And you can think of, one of the classic examples of an extreme achiever is Tony Robbins in a lot of people's minds. And the level of self-care and support that man surrounds himself with is astronomical. I mean, traveling with personal chefs, masseuses, he is tending to his system, calling in support from people all around him all the time so he can continue to achieve at a high level. So in a lot of ways, the more you bring to the world, the more you have to be able to receive and take in. Otherwise, you're going to grind yourself to death. And what I have just found is it's not that life gets magically easier when we call in something like a men's group, but it does get way better. Those same challenges, they don't destroy us the same way. They don't knock us down for days, weeks, months, or years. It's like, ooh, I feel the sting of that. And then a hand comes down, picks us up, and we get right back at it. And that type of resilience really comes from being part of a community and a collective. So it's something I'm extremely passionate about. My mission is that every man should be in a men's group. I think it would transform the world. And you can follow me and just everything I'm up to. Easiest place is at my website, which is evolutionary.men. And you can see links to podcasts and blogs and programs and live events and all that kind of stuff there. And I'm just really passionate about helping men get connected to other men. So even if you don't work with me, if you're like, hey, I'm in this local area and I need to find something, I can point you to the right resources. So don't ever hesitate to reach out.
Perfect. And if you have a father, if you have a husband, a son, a nephew, someone who is maybe looking for guidance, but they're not asking for it, I encourage you to reach out to Jason, check out the links in the description box below, begin the conversation, because as men, I always say, and I said it earlier, a man is going to look for another man to emulate. And so I always say, why not give him a good man to go after, right? A good mentor, a good guide, versus just allowing the world to haphazardly throw men for them to say, well, I guess this is who I have to be. And, this is my role model, right? You have good role models here. And one of the reasons I love coaching in session so much is because we bring on so many wonderful role models, coaches, and guides that can be that beacon, that can be that light, that can be that asset in someone's life. Because when we're trying to seek the freedom of life, sometimes we have to release the shackles of our own bounds and what society tells us. So find your meaning, find your true purpose in life. It's only a click away. Jason, thank you so much for coming on, spending some time, and of course, talking about your work.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. It's a real pleasure, and thanks for being the light that you are.